Welcome everybody to the March meeting of the RDAP. Let's begin by reviewing some minutes.
So did folks have a chance? I'm happy to pull up the February 10th minutes. Are there any edits or amendments to those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Do you want me to do that, Susan, or do you?
Yes, you're doing it beautifully.
Is there a second on approving the minutes? Oh, Mia. Yep. Sorry, you're muted, but thank you, Mia.
I'll second that.
Great. And then is there discussion? And while we go for discussion, there we go. Can folks see the minutes? Yes. Right. Any discussion, any edits, changes, modifications, clarifications?
I just wanted to mention that I was out sick, so I will not be voting.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I'm happy to scroll through it if people want that to happen, but my sense is that people are comfortable with the minutes as drafted. So I think we're probably ready for a vote of the voting members on approving the minutes. All in favor, just raise your hands. We'll go visual. Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Sheila. And then just one abstention. Any opposed to the minutes? I don't know if I've ever seen someone opposed to minutes before, but
two abstentions. I wasn't here last time, Todd.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. I think those pass back to you, Susanna.
Great. Up next, we have an update from the Racial Justice Statistics Advisory Council. Anyone on the call who would like to? Sheila, I see a hand up. Is that a voting hand, or did you have something you wanted to bring up?
I just didn't put it down. Thank you. I apologize.
Oh, okay. I see if we have somebody on from the Racial Justice Statistics Advisory Council, then we welcome that update.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, I finally learned that when things like this happen, I should look at my email. So I have an email. Just one second, let me read it. It's on the same screen, so I just have to bounce back and forth. But I think it says, Bree and Grace can't make it. Their very brief report is that at our meeting on Friday, the DRGS walked the council through their annual report and Clean Slate Initiative report, as well as the new data manager's priority for the year, including exploring sentencing and traffic stop data. Additionally, the council is considering what their role is in making forthcoming reports, data analyses, and ongoing concerns with Vermont's data governance and infrastructure more accessible to impacted communities. That is there. I'm glad I looked.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd.
You're welcome.
All right. So you all will recall that at our after our last meeting, we had a brief survey from members about whether and when and how to do a retreat. I would like to update you all on that, on the results of that. So if you just bear with me while the survey is loading on my screen, and I can tell you a little bit about what you all concluded. Okay. I don't think I should do this as a, maybe I should do this as a screen share. Hold on. Just want to scroll through and make sure that I'm not revealing any information that I don't want to reveal in a public meeting. Okay, I'm going to do this as a screen share. Comfortable doing that. Bear with me.
Did that work, Susanna?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I don't know how to change the overall settings so that folks don't have to ask. I should just do it at the beginning of every.
Then you're just going to have to wield that power responsibly, Todd.
I know. I'm comfortable with this group.
Okay. All right. So here's what you all said. Can you all see this? All right. So in general, it appears that for this group to conduct a retreat, there is greatest availability during the weekday daytime, least availability on Sundays, and sort of a mixed bag on weekday evenings and Saturdays. I want to just acknowledge that for people who get paid as part of their jobs to do this, it is simpler to prioritize weekday daytimes, but not as much for those who have other responsibilities. So I can appreciate that a lot of us coalesced around that, and it also may just need to be something that we give some more thought to make sure that we can have broader and more logistically feasible participation from people. We asked where you were willing to travel for said retreat and just named a whole bunch of places around the state. It looks like there was most consensus around Randolph with 12 people. This was a multi-check question, by the way, so you could select more than one option. It looks like 12 people selected for Randolph, followed by a plurality of 11 people for White River, Royalton, Barry, Montpelier, Waterbury, and then kind of drops off from there. So this is more data. You don't need comment from me on every single one of these. We should try to hold the retreat. The vast majority of respondents said that it should happen after today's meeting, which is why we didn't push to do one in the last few weeks, as you noticed. So we're giving ourselves a little bit more time to be able to plan it thoughtfully. We asked if you're willing to assist with planning, and there are many very helpful people on this group who said yes, and those who didn't, that's fine too. And then we asked what kinds of activities should the group conduct during the retreat. Some of the top responses including creating a work plan and a strategic vision for our work, deciding on a leadership and committee structure, and of course, breaking bread together, because that is important everywhere you go on the planet. And then we invited any additional thoughts, so people were able to give a free-form narrative response. I will stop it there and just invite any feedback or responses that anybody has if you would like to engage in sort of planning conversation right now. We could, but I might recommend to the group that we just select those people who did say they were willing to help plan and just create a separate meeting for that, for anybody who wants to participate in that, just to liberate some time here in the full group meeting. Any overarching thoughts on what we've just gone through?
Hey, everybody.
Sorry, Sheila, I saw Floor's hand first, and then I'm going to come back to you.
That makes sense because my hand wasn't even up.
Thank you, Susanna. I think that was a great, I'm glad that we had 13 participants. I agree with you. If we set up the committee today and then have that be a separate meeting, and then we can get into the rest of our meeting agenda. I agree with you. Thank you for doing that survey.
Thanks. Sheila?
I just had a question, Sheila Linton, panel member. I'm sorry I'm off camera today. I'm just not doing well. I've had a death in the family, and so things have been really tough. So thank you for your grace. I just wanted to understand a little bit more around how people want to how people actually want to like show up. If it's like when they say during the day, is during the day for people 8 to 5, 9 to 5 kind of thing, or is it a thanks for the hearts, or is it a thing where we can discuss late afternoon into early evening or something. So I'm just sort of curious about that, and I can't remember from the survey if it had that like that or not. So I'm just kind of curious for those who don't necessarily get paid and have the day. What does that look like for us, and what can we do? And yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Thanks, Sheila. I think it will probably depend on a few factors, but that's an open question that we as a group can determine. I think one factor that may weigh into that is going to be location, and how central and how much traveling has to happen may dictate what hours are feasible for us to be able to meet. And then also, if we're able to nail down what we view as an agenda for that day, how much we think we can reasonably accomplish, then that'll also help us figure out our timing and in hours. I'm open to whatever suggestions others have. I think creating an environment that is as comfortable as possible for people to be able to show up and be in their creative mind and not in their logistical hustling mind is going to be ideal for us. So yeah, I don't have specific answers. I would pose that question to the broader group. And again, we don't have to hash through it here. We can set something separate. I do think that the number of people who volunteered, I don't think it's actually a quorum. It might be a quorum of this group, and I don't know how that impacts our ability to plan that if it's a subcommittee, but I think it's for planning purposes. So I think that is an acceptable situation, but we'll confirm that and set a separate meeting to coordinate that. Does that sound okay with everyone? Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Please.
I've always these things come up all the time when we try to plan statewide meetings, and I'm really curious in the lens of equity if we've sort of polled the people who don't get paid or this isn't part of their work of where they live and try to make, and maybe that and again, I don't know where everybody lives or what the situation is, but maybe that is a starting point to be like, hey, if people are more southern that don't get paid to do this work, then maybe the people who will probably get the mileage, which I have a question about mileage, and maybe other resources to be able to attend something like that and know that that's covered, that we maybe focus it like that. And that might not be feasible because it might be where everybody's kind of all over the place and it's a moot point. But I would love to have some kind of base equity conversation so we don't revisit this every time.
Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. Lisa Ryan, she, her pronouns, Vermont Criminal Justice Council, the Vermont Police Academy. Thank you, Sheila. I was actually kind of thinking along the same lines. And Sheila, I don't know if you are a person who has volunteered to be part of the planning committee, but I was thinking about exactly what you're saying, and I certainly don't want to offer up your organization, but I've also never been to the route. And so I just put a feel out if maybe that could be a possible location. But again, I don't know what your operations look like during the day, if that's even feasible, but I just wanted to connect kind of that thread that I was thinking.
Depending on what the group determines and settles on, it is definitely an option to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I can't figure out where my hand thing is in this Zoom for some reason tonight. Yes, I want to just second Sheila's and then add my own personal situation, which is single parent of children will just be a hardship for me if I have to travel far after evenings, in the evening. And so I'm not saying it's a no, but in terms of if we're going to take, if the planners could take into consideration some of those factors in terms of anything that starts getting into the after hours, after school hours and family time, what is happening on the home front. And it's not that I expect panel members to share their personal situation. I'm just sharing mine. And so that's just something that others on this panel know, but others may not know. But yes, I appreciate the people planning and hope that we can get as many, if not all of us there, or find a date. We can do that.
I had two thoughts. One is a question. Is there appetite at all for maybe doing 2 half-day sessions instead of a full day, or more than one shorter session instead of one longer one? I know that there's pros and cons to that. So is it a non-starter idea? Does anyone feel really strongly either way about that? And then the second thing I was going to say was that it strikes me that around 2020, we all stopped carpooling to things for obvious reasons. And I don't know people's comfort level with getting back in cars with other people. But we could also, for those who are interested, we could also help people find carpool options. Obviously, we don't know where it's going to be yet, but once that's determined, if people are interested, we can help pair you up. I don't need an answer on that. I just wanted to put it out there.
You know what I think would be really cool? This is Sheila again. Is if that wherever we go, and again, we don't have to necessarily complicate it like this for this time, or we can. But what would be really cool is if we paired wherever we're going with a site visit or something. So the thing you talk about having the meeting at the root is that you get to know where the root is and what the vibe's there, and get to understand the culture a little bit and learn maybe a little about the root and whatever. And I think that if we go to wherever we go, if there is a establishment or entity that we vibe with, it'd be cool to accompany that with or I guess we're calling it a retreat, so that we're intentional also about the space. So it's like becomes a win-win situation to where we're traveling to a location where we are maybe learning or in an environment that is doing racial justice work, that is supporting potentially the work that we're already doing, and maybe making those relationships if there's a host that can host that night or whatever. So I just want to put that out there, that we, in traveling statewide, it's hard, and people want to get the most out of it, I think. And so maybe being intentional about wherever we choose, like if it's Randolph, great. Where in Randolph should we meet based on who we are and who we should be connecting to in those communities, and make it a little more worthwhile. And no, I don't think I was on the planning committee, but I know it seems like I am, so I'm not really sure right now. My executive function is sort of low.
Want all members to feel welcome to provide whatever input they have, whether or not you are able to commit bandwidth to actually sitting on a subcommittee. So please don't feel like you can't speak on it if you're not signing up to be part of a subgroup. Appreciating everybody's input and thinking about how to make all of the pieces fit together. I like the idea of a site visit, and I think, I don't know, maybe this makes me basic, but we are the RDAP, so I can think of a lot of state facilities that are very much within our wheelhouse that I'm sure many of us have never been to, that might make sense to consider visiting. And I'm also recognizing that sometimes connecting in state institutions and connecting with state institutions doesn't really give you access to the people we're especially focused on. So open to more ideas about that. I will say that whether and where we do any site visits is going to contribute to the timing question. And so that's another thing to consider, is just how long do we want our day or days to be there. I think that we probably have enough to go on that we could set up that meeting, and that group can come back to this full group with some options, which is aligned with a comment we got from Floyd in the chat. Are people comfortable moving on from this topic now and waiting for the subgroup to come back with a few options for location, timing, agenda, etc.? Okay, I'm seeing nods and thumbs. Thank you all. The next item that we have is a discussion about planning for 2026 and creating our work plan. And I am sorry, Todd, to make last minute adjustments like this, but given that the group seemed to respond in the survey that they would like to see that discussion happen in the survey, I'm wondering if it's okay with everyone here if we just continue to defer this topic until we're in a retreat setting.
I would definitely agree that it'll be more fruitful in person, and I think during the legislative session we're going to have plenty to focus on.
Okay. Thanks. And it would be probably the same with the, well, I don't know. Do people want to have a conversation now about leadership structure? We remain chairless.
Susanna, is there anything in the statute that calls for any type of specific leadership structure?
Yes, the statute specifically names a chairperson.
And so that's it. We just are by statute should have a chairperson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The statute is silent on any other positions, though, so we're not barred from having any additional quote unquote officers. But that is what minimally the statute asks for. Lisa?
Thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna add on to that we had talked about several meetings ago, like an executive committee or something like that. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't still off the table or on the table, I guess. I know that a chair's position is a lot of work, and so I would like to see us explore that option. I would also like to really make sure that this agenda item at some point has enough time on the agenda to really think through, because I'm not sure if that is at the retreat, then that's fine, knowing also that not everybody's going to be able to make the retreat. So I just like to see it on the agenda at a meeting in the near future where we could dedicate some time to that.
Thanks, Lisa. I welcome anyone who disagrees with this, but I get the sense that this is closely tied to the previous discussion about our work plan, our vision for ourselves and what we want to accomplish, and that people may be willing or unwilling to step forward for this based on what that workload will look like. So I think it makes sense that we get a sense that we wrap our minds around what do we expect this group to work on And that will help people understand whether they feel like leadership is right for them. So I'm going to ask for a really, really participatory decision here. If you go in, Sheila.
And I apologize if I forgot that this has been sent out, but if y'all remember last session, we were gonna get Aton's sort of job duties that he was doing at that time. And I know, I think it was you, Todd, right? We were gonna get some more of the information. If we weren't able to get it from him, at least derive of it somehow or put something together. So is there something that what I like to call is what we think is we want people to do versus what actually happens? Is that document available? because I remember just there was a lot, you're right, that there's a lot with the chair and like a lot of testimony, a lot of this, a lot of that, which I don't know how much all of that is discussed other than sort of in the moment of like, hey, RDAP, this is coming up. Would you like me all to testify? I'll take the lead because this is like, you know, the onus of me being the chair. I can do that. And I'm versed in doing that, whatever. But it got a little murky for me of fully what the responsibilities are. And I would also like to say, I like the idea, if the idea is what I'm thinking it is, of the executive committee, because I think it should be shared responsibility. I think it needs to be more than one person. And so if we do chair, we could do multiple chairs. Because I guess we could do that. It doesn't say we can't, or that we absolve that into an executive committee, because I feel as though based on how we presented last year, there was almost a form of that. I think like you, Rebecca, would have been like a piece of that like executive committee in a way, if we were to call it that, like testifying and writing things and being on subcommittees, things like that, you know, to where the people who were able to give more of those resources and time were that. And so I don't know if I'm mincing all words or whatever, but those are my thoughts on this.
Thanks, Sheila. Flor?
Thank you, Sheila, for asking those questions. And I'm new to the group, so I'm just trying to wrap my mind of what you know. I think that this is something that we definitely want to discuss at our next meeting, and potentially discuss it after we're all. So let me clear my mind. We are already operating under Robert rules, right? In theory, and we are also, and I mean in theory, I mean that respectfully, like, because we don't have a chair yet, and we can have a chair, a vice chair, an executive committee, and also a legislative committee, just to name a couple of things. The idea in most state advisory councils that I have participated, and this is just my own experience with some experience in governance, is that the importance of having a chair or co-chairs at most, but at least one chair, is that there's a spokesman for the group. But that doesn't mean that that chair has more power than anybody in the state advisory council. The job of the chair is to make sure that there's consensus and that you can bring all of the ideas together, so that and that doesn't mean also that the chair is the only person that is testifying, right? Or I'm not familiar with, you know, Rebecca and others have been here longer than me, but to have that governance structure really well established allows us to have to have better way to make sure that our work plan is gonna work, to make sure that we can monitor the outcomes that we want from the legislature, and to make sure that we are all trying to coalesce behind, even if the priorities are going to be hard, right? We can all come behind some recommendations together. So finding that common ground and that consensus, even if it's just in incremental steps, and even if in the past hasn't been achieved, I think that there's ways for us to do it, but having a structure that helps us maintain and advance the work is important in order to be more effective as a council. It's just my thought. So I wouldn't think that having multiple, you know, at most co-chairs, but having multiple chairs, it is really hard to have a spokesman for the group. So, and the governance really matters, because the outcomes are just as good as we are, as governing as a group. That's just my personality. I don't mean to. I know I'm new, but I'm just sharing my truth.
I think that's really well said, Flor, and thank you for saying that. In my kind of observation of this group, I do think that a lot has fallen to the chair, and I think it's too much for one person to hold. And I think Flor was kind of getting at this, that there's a way to disperse decision making, and to hold decision making and hold responsibility through an executive committee and other functions. So if we end up going to a committee structure, and I think this is the conversation that we're looking to have at some point, but if we go to a committee structure and then you have chairs of the committees who end up being part of the executive committee, that is a really nice way to sort of hold the voices of all the people on this group and to share in the work. And so I'm in agreement with Flora that I think you only want either co-chairs or a chair. Or maybe I should say what we want.
Rebecca, is that a hand?
Yes, thank you. So I would recommend that if we're going to table this subject for our retreat, which I also support, given that it is going to be we need some time to think about. And I think it's true. It'll be useful to have as much information that we can collect, whether it's from Eitan, if we don't have that already, recalling and if he's willing to do it, for the duties that he did that were invisible, that we couldn't see. We can share how we have structured it over time, and certainly, as Sheila's taught was just sharing, we effectively, once we decided what we would want to focus on in any given year, we sought volunteers from the panel to join committees. And inevitably, there was sort of an organizer, I guess, within those committees, and rallied everyone to meet on those subjects and then come back. We never called in an executive, but even before Eitan, Mark is here. We had sort of a co-chair situation. But yes, I think that if we can pull together historically what has happened, whether we've called it whatever, and then take these ideas that everyone is sharing now, and if we can get some notice ahead, all the better. But absolutely, I'm open and interested in all these things everyone's sharing.
Thanks, Rebecca. Todd.
Thank you, Susanna. So very quickly, Sheila, thanks for raising that. We had definitely talked about it, and I went back and just looked at my correspondence on it. And I think Eitan and I had agreed on kind of setting up a brief outline that he was going to fill in, and then in the time period between that discussion and when we thought we'd get it done was when his job, when he was relieved of his duties. And so it kind of hit at an unfortunate moment, and I did not follow up on getting more information. So I can certainly follow up with him if he's game for it now. I mean, you'll see what I just put in the chat is very high level bullet points of kind of what the chair was doing. I would say, you know, with deference to Susanna, it's basically what we're kind of doing now between the two of us in terms of kind of juggling the pieces. And otherwise, I completely agree with the previous statements about, you know, a unified spokesperson and then diversified support system to both ensure that information flows out and up from everybody on the panel.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for adding those items in the chat, and I see a few more forthcoming from Rebecca. I've got Lisa and then Mia.
I'll be really short. If I'm being really honest, I don't fully think it's appropriate to be reaching out to Eitan at this time. I mean, I think we're a little too far ahead. He's on his healing journey, and I just would not support that.
I can agree with that. I really can. Yeah, I was mentioning it, if we had it, if we don't, yeah, there's no reason. We can figure it out.
That is why I raised my hand as well. I think that we need to leave Aton alone. The opportunity is gone.
Thanks to all of you for voicing that. I think the good news, some good news, a good news is that we have a lot of historical knowledge on this group from the immediate past chair and past chairs before that, people who've been on this group for varying durations of time, that I think we probably could piece this together pretty accurately ourselves and build a profile, not just of what the chair has historically done, but also what we envision a chair could do in the future, right? Nothing says that it has to be an exact mirror of past practice. So maybe I would recommend that as a group, we try to build that job description or profile ourselves. And then if we get stuck, maybe seek assistance from where it feels right. Does that sound all right for us? Okay, I'm taking those 2 nods as all nods. The second half is that I would like to be able to, for us to compile that and then have it prepared as sort of pre-reading for that retreat so that everybody can come prepared, not having seen it for the first time on that day, to discuss what a collective vision for the future of this group's leadership could look like. Yeah? Because there's a difference between polite nodding and agreement nodding, and I don't know which one you all are doing. I will start demanding specific emojis so that I get real answers.
Zada, I didn't realize it was a question. My bad. I just thought it was a statement. So I was slow at the hands.
Thank you.
How about a polite thumbs up?
I'll take it. All right. So here is what I'm taking away from this conversation. Please tell me if I'm getting this wrong. Number 1, yes, we want to retreat. Yes, we have a group of people who are willing to help plan it. Yes, we're going to take everything that we've discussed here today about logistics and topics, etc., and come back with a couple of options for who, what, when, where, why, how. At that retreat, we are going to have a discussion about leadership structure and work plan and general vision. Prior to that date, we will have sent you a grouply compiled job description of what the chair position has historically looked like, so that we can be prepared on that day to have a discussion about what we want it to look like going forward. We are still interested in the possibility of a leadership structure that may include an executive committee or something of the sort, maybe formalizing the roles of those people who lead subcommittees. And of course, inherent in that is determining what standing subcommittees we will even have. So all of that is kind of baked into the same discussion. Is that an accurate summary, and have I missed anything important? Okay. So before we move on from this topic, what I would like to do is grab the names of people who responded affirmatively in the survey that they wanted to help plan. I'm going to put those in the chat and just ask those people to confirm whether they are still interested. And if anybody is not in that list and wants to be added to it, then we can do that I'm gonna do that now, and then Flor, I see you with a hand.
I was just raising my hand because I had volunteered to help. So I didn't know how.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
All right. So while I go grab those names and put them in the chat, I am going to ask Todd if he would like to kick off a discussion about updating us on the legislative proposal.
Absolutely. So as folks may recall, the question that we were discussing in February was kind of the position of legislative counsel that our legislative proposal around an equity impact assessment tool, or the implementation of an impact assessment tool by the legislature sort of in the committee process, move forward as legislation. Leg counsel came back, those are the lawyers for the legislature, and said, boy, this looks more like a rule than it does like legislation. And then we discussed that here, and there were some strong opinions about, wanting to understand what are the differences between a bill, a legislative choice, a statute, and a rule. And so we had a meeting about a month ago with Representative Arsenault, who's the sponsor of the potential legislation, and the clerk of the House, who's kind of the keeper of the rules, and Betsy Ann, who's the clerk, talked us through the differences between rules and legislation, and was of the same opinion that this really is a rule. So it's better suited to be a rule. That said, it's our proposal. We can push for it and advocate as we see fit. So I'm going to share my screen here and I think I sent this out to everybody, but for the purpose of discussion and kind of what we had talked about at our last meeting, I just grabbed a bunch of the topics we had mentioned and broke them into kind of a pretty quick and dirty chart. So this is not any kind of final product, but it's just kind of capturing the conversation we had. I'm happy to walk through it, but the upshot was basically rules are what govern how a legislative body operates. And each chamber has its own set of rules. There are very few joint rules. There are a lot of rules that happen in both chambers. There are very few joint rules, if that makes sense. Both chambers, for example, adopt the same, what are called crossover dates on which a piece of legislation has to move out of a committee and into the whole body in order to be considered by the opposite chamber. They both agree to those dates. Otherwise, and there are other examples of them having shared rules, but not joint rules. So, and a statute generally governs how the executive is going to execute the law. So we can talk through process, and this will also highlight a few of the other differences. Interesting, because I didn't know any of this stuff about rules. The process actually for a rule becoming a rule is not that different from a bill, in that there's a resolution to amend the rules, similar to introducing a bill. Then it is assigned to a committee. In this case, it's the Rules Committee of the Chamber. And then there are hearings and a committee vote, and then it goes out of committee and back to the House or Senate. Because we're talking to the House clerk, I didn't make this House Senate, I mostly made it House, but my understanding is the rules are pretty similar, or the process is very similar in both chambers. And then it gets voted on. So that's kind of the process pieces. I didn't walk through the bicameral process, but it's not wholly different, except that it moves across to another chamber when a statute, a bill is moving towards becoming a statute. And of course, has the governor signing off on it. Timing, there is no timing deadline for rules. They can come up anytime. A resolution can be raised at any point in time. Whereas with legislation, generally speaking, there are deadlines for drafting. As we've talked about in this group, there are short form bills and long form bills and et cetera. That date I was talking about crossover is actually this Friday. So I think practically speaking, and this is a challenge we will no doubt discuss at our retreat, is sort of how can we move as fast as the legislative calendar moves, especially on something that we've put a good amount of time and energy on. Because I don't see a path to this moving legislatively in terms of statute this session. Durability, this was actually one of the more interesting pieces, the durability and accountability measures. So for rules generally last until the next biennium, and the first resolution passed in the chamber is to adopt the prior biennium's rules. It is not frequent that rules are then changed. That's not to say it's not possible, and a change in rules would be just like a change, like a creation of a rule. As I understand it, they happen the same way. As it says there, they can vote to amend or update the rules, which of course is different than a statute. A statute would then have to go through the bicameral process. I sort of talk a little bit there about like enforcement, and this is a challenge, is that at least in the view of the House, there is no real judicial remedy for the violation of a statute that governs how the legislature will operate. It's non-justiciable because it's not really the judiciary's business to tell the legislature whether they're performing the job the way the legislatures told themselves to perform their job, if that makes sense. So I found that really interesting. I have to admit, I did not take time to do my own legal research on that. So I was taking what they said, and I'm sure we can dig into it more. I will also say, if that's the position of the House, it's going to be hard for us to change their view of how their rules are going to actually, or their laws, operate. It was also really interesting that rules supersede statute as far as how a legislative process would play out, and that suspension of the rules requires the whole body to vote on a suspension of the rules. It's doable, and happens. It happens all the time, especially in the waning days of a session where they're suspending the rules in terms of reading or notice, et cetera. That said, those would all be at least somewhat transparent. And again, there's some accountability measures worked in there. Suspension and avoidance. The challenge for a statute, again, is that it's not clear how it would be enforced if it were violated beyond public pressure and accountability through political process. Similar is true in a rule. There is a mechanism with a rule that if it's violated, so in this instance, if an impact assessment wasn't performed in the way that the rule required it to be performed, it could be considered an objectionable bill, and there's a process about whether it can be considered or not, and determinations of whether an objectionable bill can be taken up. Again, maybe the similar thing could play out if there were a statute on it. It's not clear exactly how that process would go forward. Again, especially if that non-justiciable piece plays out and there's no real recourse to the courts. Public input is actually somewhat similar in terms of hearings and committees and witnesses on statutes, and then under rules, there's certainly rule drafting and a debate. And again, this is the argument around rules cuts both ways. It's a single chamber making its own determination about how it will operate. So there is no input from the other chamber per se, and there's no input from the governor. And then I just flagged, like, we have somebody in the House who's willing to push this forward. We would need to find somebody in the Senate if it were a rule that we wanted to push. And then I just kind of at the end here laid out, at least quickly, my thoughts on what the concerns, both taking from this conversation we had last month and then kind of processing the conversation we had with the House clerk. So that, the upshot, at least from my perspective, was that a statute, one, is probably not going to happen this session in any event. And two, if the folks in charge of determining what is an appropriate statutory proposal believe that it should be a rule, I'm not saying we shouldn't continue pushing it. I just think it's tougher sledding, but that was my reaction to kind of hearing that conversation. Happy to answer whatever questions I can, but I think it's really like worth a more conversation with this group. I'm going to stop sharing the chart. Yeah, Rebecca.
Thanks, Todd. And I couldn't make that meeting, and I appreciate the fact of the meeting happened and the collection of information, and even more this nice table that you've pulled out. It's very helpful. And for me, I want to share with the group that fundamentally, philosophically, I'm of the position the opinions I share to this panel generally come from this place. When we're reviewing ideas for reform policy to the legislature, I don't operate from a politician perspective. I operate from our statutory mandate, which is addressing, which I understand as trying to provide the legislature what we think will actually work to address racism in the criminal and juvenile justice systems. And so I don't work from a compromised position, and I just see the columns where, particularly in the concerns, the durability, the accountability, the bicameral stuff, confirming what I shared with this group before as to my concerns. A rule is inherently temporary. It's inherently built to be potentially inconsistent between the two chambers. And yes, the heavier political lift necessary to get legislation through is perhaps more difficult. And again, my outsider's perspective on how the legislature works in any given session, I can see that. That is, of course, almost a given. To me, though, that doesn't alter the analysis. Whether or not this can work, whether or not it's enforceable, to me, that is how you write the actual bill itself. Whether or not there's enforceability mechanisms that make it have real teeth is about how you draft the legislation. Whether we have models out there, I was part of that committee that worked on it, although I was not part of that great phone call I heard shared about DC and their experience with similar legislation and how or how not the concerns with that legislation in effect. So we know that it exists in legislative form. I would encourage this group, to me, if we're going after lasting impact, to not suggest out of the gate that we support a temporary rule that, while perhaps the practice is that it is readopted every year, the setup is such that is apparently temporary. It's not the same status as law passed.
Thank you, Rebecca. Other thoughts, reactions?
Todd, not really opining on the path before us so much as just also wanting to appreciate the time and effort that went into that really digestible analysis. I thought it was a really interesting sort of civics lesson, and the sort of like, civics geek, but not legislative expert in me really appreciated it. That's a great resource. And I hope it gets use in other forums too. So thanks for putting that out there into the public space. Nice work.
Thank you.
I would echo that. I think this was really well done. I have to admit that there were a couple things in there that was like, I don't understand how that would play out. Do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
I can't promise that I'll be able to answer because there were definitely areas where I was like, really?
Yeah, well, it's really around the accountability piece.
Mm-hmm.
And where it says the rules supersede legislative procedure set forth in statute, that I don't understand what that means. So, and I think other people maybe didn't understand that either.
So my understanding, because we asked some questions about that, and I probably could have framed it better. Mia, do you want to jump in before I answer that?
Right, no, I'm just can't find the right buttons, but I'm in agreement with Karen.
Thanks.
So my understanding, because that was surprising too, is that if there were a statute that required a certain action by the legislature, a certain procedure or process by the legislature, it would and could be superseded by a rule of the legislature if the two were found in contradiction. And I think the argument there is that one is the legislative body gets to decide how the legislative body operates, and that, you know, to Rebecca's point about changing and durability, theoretically, every new biennium, every new session, every new day, they can change the rules.
Right.
And you know, so the flip side of that is and supersede a statute.
Yeah.
So and again, I didn't do independent legal research to kind of true that up, but I had no reason to think that the clerk of the chamber was gonna, be wrong on that.
Right. So my
and
follow-up question.
More research if people want to.
Yeah, and maybe we do this, in my opinion, and non-attorney on this call, and so appreciating, Rebecca, what you have to say about the durability is something that we want. That's a question I have. Is that saying that even if we got a legislative change, that rules could still supersede in a session, a session or in a biennium, that they could still supersede what would be in statute anyway?
Yeah. That's my understanding of it is, but it would require a rule change, right? They would have to essentially pass a rule. So assuming that a statute passed that said you're going to do racial impact equity assessments, they could pass a rule that said, no, we don't.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to wade too far into the legal waters there, but it's like, I'm not quite sure how any litigation would arise out of that. But even if it could, theoretically, that idea that, and again, I'm just taking their word for it. The idea that the rule would then supersede the statute would seem to play out.
Okay. Well, I am really glad that we have more time to think about this, because in my opinion, I am not sure that there is a right or wrong path, is kind of what I'm starting to see, is that nothing is guaranteed. It's kind of what I'm seeing from your really good chart, is that, we could go in either direction. And I think where I come from is, it can be really hard to legislate cultural shifts and cultural changes. And that part of where I'm coming from is, of course, I want the durability. Rebecca, everything you said, I was like, yes, yes, yes. But I also want our policymakers to be thinking differently and to be pausing and asking questions about what is the racial equity potential impact of this legislation, which in my mind is like, why aren't we just doing that anyway? Like they always have to send the policy to the money committee to see the impact on either taxes or, on the budget. It's almost like we need that. That's what happens with every bill, is we ask that question gets posed and that there's an analysis. And so I feel like if that's kind of what we want, I'm not sure that there's a wrong door. So just a thought as a non-attorney in this group.
I think you're in good company there. Just before I turn to you, Grant, just on the finance note, I think it is important when there is a fiscal note attached to a piece of legislation, there is a rule that requires that bill to then go to the money committees. So that's another thing that operates by rule within the chamber. Again, doesn't change anything you or Rebecca said on that note. Grant.
Yeah, this might be a pretty stupid question, but is there a way to pass a statute and then to pass a rule that says you have to follow the statute?
I don't think that's stupid. It would be belt and suspenders, right? Arguably. I think it's a heavy lift, and I think, yeah, I don't know if it changes the analysis and durability just because the rule could just get superseded by another rule that then would supersede the statute, right? Like, and I will just say from a kind of democratic perspective, there'd still be transparency and the opportunity for pressure to be brought in those circumstances, right? If they're trying to circumvent rules around equity or otherwise, and a real opportunity for people on the floor to debate. And I think that's true regardless of whether it's a statute or a rule. But I think one of the hallmarks we had there was like transparency and I think in public engagement. Other thoughts, comments? Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Todd, just to be clear, because I know you talked about it being too late effectively to even think about this being past this session, given the late hour. But you didn't say whether you thought, or it was even brought up during the meeting, whether anyone thought a rule could be passed this session.
I think it says on the chart, a rule can happen anytime.
No, but technically, yes, as could legislation be passed any, I guess we're in crossover. So, but did you get a sense whether this kind of rule, not any rule, but this rule, a rule encapsulating this, could pass this session?
So I don't have a political take, other than Angela. I don't know. I haven't sort of whipped any votes on anything. So I don't know what that, if that's what you mean. Procedurally, I think there are, just like any piece of legislation to have legs, I think there's a degree of kind of building the right path and getting the right people to kind of be on board, to Karen's point about a cultural shift. And I should say, there's always a possibility that you can take a piece of legislation and attach it to an existing piece of legislation at any point in time during, even after crossover, right? And theoretically, it can move to the other chamber if it's, there's a process there. So I shouldn't say it's impossible and it couldn't happen. It's just, we'd have to find a bill that was germane and get it attached to it. I think there's a bigger question around, sort of what it's going to take, what pressure we can bring to bear, regardless of the path we take and regardless of the timing. I think, I don't know what the appetite would be in the House or the Senate in the coming 2 months to engage in this, but that's not a reason not to try.
And I appreciate that. I just want to follow up because the question and the answer I heard from you is that it's a tough lift to get a rule like this passed at this late date at the end of this biennium, which means that if it were to pass, next session would be the start of a new biennium and a new set of rules, right? But I guess my point of just bringing this up is just to flush out whether there's an urgency to land on this question now. Is this something that we have to decide today?
No, to Karen, I would agree with Karen, and if that's the point you're making, I don't think the timing should drive this decision. Judge.
Good evening, Judge Roy Thibault. I'll just note that, one vehicle, if there was a sense of urgency, is the Judiciary Miscellaneous Bill would be the type of place where a lot of things get added on there that are good ideas that aren't necessarily controversial. So I'm not sure how well developed the final cut of language is, or whether Representative Arsenault would want to do the heavy lift on this in House Judiciary, but that would seem to be an opportunity if there is a consensus towards making a push towards initiating that discussion now. And I think that is either came off the wall today or is on for testimony tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, floor.
I just have some questions. I'm not a lawyer either, but what strikes me again is just are more about the process of doing things. Is that crossover is this Friday already, and I know the legislature kind of doesn't really like anything new coming up, but coming up this weekend, if we want to make meaningful change, I am wondering, and I understand the urgency, and I haven't been with you guys before, so. With all of that said, March, if we now decided, rule versus legislation in March or April, and then we started to, you already have the equity statement, and we could figure out the template depending on what you guys, what we all decide together, and then be really ready. So then do some of that work in April and May and spend the summer building some coalition around this. And like Susan, I just put in the chat some other people that would be willing to help. Mm-hmm. And then we start the session with really, like a plan, instead of like, so they know that we're strong, you know what I mean? Like, so we sort of create a plan around your plan, your nice table that you put in there, and sort of work towards that goal. And the only question, well, there were many questions, but that would take too long. But the one, just because I don't understand the legalities, I'm familiar with the State House process, but in one of the concerns or questions that I have was who trains the committee staff? Is that part of what we, because for it to be successful is like they really have to understand it, and would that fall on us? I just don't understand how that works, and that was my only other question that I had. And I had started putting it on the chat. I was just gonna put what I was saying on the chat, but you guys might know that answer, and I don't. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Do you want to answer that, Rebecca, or did you have something else?
No, go ahead, Todd.
So the legislature trains its own staff, and I mean, I think that's a question we've kicked around a little bit in terms of how this proposal might play out, meaning kind of who would be responsible either for performing it. And I think what we landed on was that the committee chairs would be, I think. I don't think it was the sponsors of the bill, because they're not always in the committee of jurisdiction. So it was going to be the committee chairs. And I think there was even language at one point we at least talked about, if not otherwise, requiring sort of a certain amount of training or an annual assessment, or every, for new members, getting educated around how the impact assessment tool works. But I think those are all, valid questions to consider, however we push this proposal forward. Yeah, Rebecca.
Continuing with the discussion that people have raised, Todd, Judge Tebow, about making it clear, sure, and because I think I muddled it, to confirm there is a possibility to get even legislation of what we presented through this session, through what others have already referenced, this miscellaneous judiciary bill, even though we're past crossover and floor. I just want to make sure that concern is addressed and heard, because it is confusing how you can be past crossover but still be able to add new language. And it's because it's this existing bill, this miscellaneous judiciary bill, that has started and gone through the crossover. But what can always be added is you can amend a bill that has passed that. And so it is common for one of these miscellaneous judiciary bills, whether it's starting from the judiciary or the Senate, to add things at the end. And in fact, often it does. And so back to this point, and also Flora, I understand your recommendation. I see it in the chat about suggesting time and waiting for April and March to let us dig back into this. As part of this committee on this proposal, with others on this panel for a long time, and this panel has addressed this issue for a long time, I don't think, and we came at where we did with our recommendation in our report to the legislature, without wanting to commit more, because we made a decision that we could not do more, because we weren't drafters. We could present the bottom line issues that we wanted any legislation to encompass with this. We presented those principles, but we made a decision as a panel to not go further because we just didn't have the capacity to do it. And so I don't think it would be worth our time or worth delaying the possibility of implementing this recommendation, most importantly, if there is in fact a chance to get that forward this session, and in fact sets it up even more strategically so that for the new biennium, January, with the new representatives that have been voted in, that they've come with some momentum behind it. And that is even getting further ahead and more forward leaning than just sitting and waiting to do more than what I don't know if our panel, certainly I feel like we've done and exhausted this from our end.
Other thoughts? So just on a process point, so crossover is this coming Friday. Nothing has passed over crossover yet unless it's already passed. Miscellaneous judiciary, as Judge Thibault said, there was testimony today. I believe they're going to vote it out on Thursday from House Judiciary. So I don't think there's much likelihood of getting anything in to that bill on the House side, but certainly it's something we can approach with the Senate, though we don't really have a champion in the Senate at this point. Not to say we couldn't talk to the chair of Senate Judiciary. Thank you, Laura. But again, I think there is sort of a threshold question, and which is, and we haven't talked to the Senate either about what it would mean, whether the Senate's rules opinion is the same as the House's. So that's another option. To me, I think the biggest challenge is that the House doesn't believe this is valid legislation, that it should be a rule. Mia, is that your hand up? I can't. The backlighting is a little hard. Okay. Go ahead, Rebecca.
And Todd, I don't question that assessment from House. I would suggest and make the recommendation that this panel may stand firm or based on our prior submission as to what we want the the equity assessment tool to be, but also to say further that we think that this is so important. We think that this should be legislation. Whether or not there's the politics to get it forward, that's, I think, neither here nor there in terms of our job as a panel, because these decisions will be made. I think it is technically feasible and the political will may be there, but I think what a powerful message to send from this panel right now, that we would like to make sure this is so important, that we think that it should be legislation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to take a straw poll on that. I'm not sure we have the clarity. I personally don't agree that legislation is the right route. That was the construct. I could take the time to do the legal research, but I'm going to agree with what the House clerk said, which is rules supersede statute, and statutes on the process of the legislature are not justiciable. So even if it were to pass both chambers and get the governor's signature, which I think is an open political question, I'm not sure it's even the right route. I don't disagree with pushing forward to get something moving this session. I'm just one vote on the panel. I'm not convinced that a statute is actually a better choice. Go ahead, Flo.
Yeah, and Rebecca, my comment really was more about crossover being on Friday. Having been testifying this past few weeks is just is more and I know that we're not political, but it does take into consideration the politics right now in it, and for the most part, they don't like anything new within this last week. And I know that we could put in miscellaneous bill, but understanding how we all are right now, and we do not have a coalition either in sort of leadership within, we still are working ourselves together. I think it would be wonderful for us to have like the ability to come strong next year. Now, I don't know that I fully understand, and I would be looking for Todd's guidance in order to vote today, if that was what we were trying to do. There's more catching up that I will need to do in order to be able to vote today. And I think it makes sense for us to have to be like they say, clarity is yeah, clarity is really important, especially within a group. And I don't think I have the clarity at this moment, and we would benefit of having that.
Thanks, both. Mia.
I just want to clarify with Rebecca. Are you proposing we sort of vote on that like now? On moving forward on a rule and are you, I just wanted to clarify that.
No, thank you. I am, let me clarify. I would not support sending the message to the legislature now that we would be okay with a rule. It doesn't sound like there's a vote either way on that now. I also wanted to show this panel, and so to the extent that we could message now in these final waning days, but not so late in the game that it's not possible for language to get into it, whether or not there is political will. And in fact, we can debate whether or not it is even more important to do this now, given greater national politics. But that's what I wanted to make sure this panel knows, that we are in sort of this critical period. We have March. We don't necessarily have to vote now on this, but we have 2 more months left. If we wanted to send a strong message either way on that question, we could, but I wouldn't want to send the message being that it should be a rule.
I mean, is it a thing that we could vote and see where we're landing on 2 items, whether it should be a rule or a legislative thing, or and then point 2 on whether we should proceed this year, depending on how that, I mean, I don't know if it's a point of order. I'm not a big Robert's Rule fan, but I'm just hearing like this committee, this panel has done a lot of work prior to me being here, and really is excited about sending this message at this particular time. And like we can like put a vote in and to see how everybody else is feeling.
Are we looking for a vote or more of a temperature check of where
Okay.
folks are at in the room?
Yeah,
No,
I just like
I
to
asked that
hear.
a formal vote is one thing, but kind of getting a sense of what everybody feels like maybe would be informative. Like we've heard from
Sure.
both sides of the argument.
Agree.
And I think,
Grant,
you know, sorry.
Go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to say, formally, we already voted to push the proposal forward. So I think this is much more of a temperature check, kind of like what's the next step? How do we want to do it? And we didn't warn a vote, so like, I think probably technically we have to provide some opportunity on that front. So I do think it's more like, to Rebecca's point, like there's time left, and maybe it's really just like, okay, what are we gonna do and how are we gonna do it?
I can share my opinion, just because folks have been. I felt myself somewhat compelled by Karen's point that this change, we're really looking for a culture shift to occur within a body, and I think there might be some value. I can see a path forward either way, but I could see some value of this being in rule to kind of shift culture. And maybe gain force over time also, that there might be a win in that, and affecting as this becomes a normative procedure, as every committee starts or some committees start doing this, becomes increasingly normal and we can always add to. It feels to me like that might be a softer way into affecting a culture. I know that wasn't exactly your point, Karen, but you said the word that we're affecting a culture here, and I thought that there could be some good strategy attached to that.
No, I think that I'm aligned, Tyler, with what you were saying.
So we are in a strange place because we're looking to make a decision for ourselves on how to push a decision that other people have the power to make. And so I think that just from what we've seen from past recommendations, sometimes it takes multiple attempts and multiple years to get something through. And I think it makes sense for us to have a plan A and a plan B. And so it may be the case that we're not talking about either or, but rather just an order of operations. I'll be really honest, I fully expect there to be enough pushback on this from the legislature that this is uphill for us. And we know this because Ori has been recommending this to them for years now, and it has not been done. So I don't think that it was ever going to be a slam dunk. And so I think that we should be very prepared to have to attempt this and ring this bell several times. The question is, in these last weeks of session, which bell are we as a group going to be ringing? The rule bell or the bill bell? We have days to ring the bill bell and no firm time limit to ring the rule bell, but it is far less decisive and concrete than the more immediate legislation route. I think it makes sense for us to do a temperature check of where we are as a group. And so I'm going to ask for everybody who is able to access your reactions. And if you're not seeing it on the bottom toolbar of whatever device you're using, it may be in your ellipsis menu or more. If you are proposing legislation that we push really hard to try to get this included in a bill now, then please give me red heart. If you are pushing for rule option, please give me surprised face emoji. I named those two because they are the two quick ones, so you don't have to go digging for them. Okay. Based on this highly scientific voting method.
Susanna, I couldn't find my surprise face emoji, so I didn't do that.
Me too. I can't either, but oh.
Then you
Accept
have
that.
Susanna, I actually was feeling a third option, which is that I think we could actually use a little more time. There are a few of us who are new, who are uncertain about this, and also wanting to be careful about decisions that have been made by the body before we joined it. So third option would actually be mine if there were one, which is I would be in favor of us taking some more time to consider this decision.
Okay.
I'm not sure
Thanks,
this is the
Karen.
right session, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Karen. I respect the thoughtfulness. I will say that if we give ourselves more time before acting one way or another, then we're inherently not taking the bill route
Right.
because of how short the
Exactly.
time is on that.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. I was saying postponed to next year. Sorry.
Oh, postpone to next year, you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to check? So by our scientific poll, conducted with fidelity to principles of survey design, I saw more people leaning in favor of pursuing a rule than a bill. But in light of Karen's suggestion, I want to offer anybody the opportunity to change their, I'm not going to say vote, to change their feedback if that is an option that's appealing. And that option would be to defer until next year when we've really had more time to consider the options. Okay, I am seeing one comment in chat of another person who supports waiting. Sheila, I see you with a hand.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, we'd be waiting all the time. And I think that we've been waiting, we've been doing this. And those of you who are new, you are right. There has been a lot of conversation around this. And I just feel after a certain point, we're just delaying the inevitable to have the same conversation. I also agree with Rebecca. I'm like almost like go hard or go home. If there's a way that we are able to put into that work to create that bill for this legislation session, I understand and respect Karen about the culture shift, but this is decades, lifetime culture shift that we're trying to create. And just by us having these conversations, just by the legislature being just by all these things that we've been doing is part of that culture shift. So it's like I'm not ready to bow down to create that culture shift, even though I understand strategically where you all are coming from. I want to make that clear. I'm not ignorant about that, but I just don't think it's the game plan that I want to sit on as a person who's directly impacted by it. And so I don't have time to wait like that. And so I think strategically, there's a saying like no press is bad press. And so it kind of will use that example that getting up in there, getting people talking about it, getting people getting testimony, people getting angry, people not agreeing, whatever they need to do is going to be what it's going to be. But that is part of the culture shift that's going to happen. It's either going to happen now or it's going to happen later. I prefer to do it now. So I vote legislation. I vote for now.
Thank you, Sheila. Judge Tebow.
I agree with Sheila that I think, first of all, just having been a creature of the legislature in the past and testifying, post crossover actually offers some really interesting time because sometimes the committees don't necessarily have a lot of urgent work to do until the end of the session. And I don't mean to undermine that, but you can get some things that otherwise might not move in front of a full committee to get the attention that it needs without the pressure of a deadline. And understanding the competing interest here of doing it now versus getting something next year, it might not be a bad idea to try to compel at least one committee to have a hearing or get this discussed this session so that next year in the beginning of the biennium it could be a priority or identified as something that a diverse group of stakeholders want to actually advance and move forward. And then if the legislature unto itself feels that it's more appropriate to do this as a rule, they may be in a position to then formulate that as part of a rule package at the beginning of the next biennium. So I think the advantages of going more aggressively to socialize this among legislators is beneficial if it's a group priority to advance this.
Thank you. Mia.
I won't prolong. I won't say too much that hasn't already been said, but I'm a new person and I absolutely trust the people who came before me. That they had the discussions. I've been able to see firsthand how thoughtful these discussions are, and they have weighed all of the options and came up with something great. And now is the time not to back away. We are not like to be soft landing. This is not the time for all of that right now, like just in general. And so even as a new person, I am like fully on board with moving forward with the plans that the people who came before me had. So I just wanted to add that additional perspective.
Okay. Grant.
Yeah, I just wanted to express my excitement for this rule or statute, whichever we're pushing for. Yeah, it's been definitely a couple of years coming. I've been looking forward to us making some movement with this in our state since DEI came under attack. But I just want to make sure that it's also set up in a way that's kind of like long lasting. And yeah, I think if we can do something quickly that's going to be impactful, then I would love to do that because it's been a long time coming. But if it's going to be more impactful to wait, I guess I'd want to vote for that.
Thanks, Grant. And Todd.
Yeah, would just say, well, I think a rule is the right approach. I think action is more valuable. And I do think I hear Karen and Floor's concern about sort of like building, and I think there's still value the way that the judge laid it out, right? There's value in getting conversation in the chambers, regardless of what route it ultimately takes. And so if getting a hearing happens by virtue of making a suggestion to Senate Judiciary, then that could easily be a way to get people in the chair to talk about it. And likewise, you know, going back to Rep Arsenault, who I might be able to join us, she said she wasn't free till 7. And just seeing about the possibility of getting a rule proposed and get something to the Rules Committee, not that it would necessarily move, but, you know, it never hurts to have both chambers chewing on the same thing, if possible. But I would say getting something moving this session is valuable.
All right. So I'm seeing, I'm hearing that we still have a number of people who are kind of in each camp. But one thing that I'm picking up in the discussion is that people who are in favor of pursuing legislation are expressing a tremendously strong sentiment, and a lot of passion and a lot of personal investment. And I want to make sure that this group is really holding that and understanding it. I think that it is also my suggestion that we, at the very least, bang the drum while we still have the session ongoing, with the understanding that timing is not on our side and that we may still end up having to pursue a rule anyway as a plan B. I know this isn't everybody's preferred path, but could we all live with that strategy? And as members and reps of this group, could we all support that strategy in other spaces? Okay.
And just to be clear, Susanna, the strategy is that the group consensus wise would move forward and working to create legislation this year with the understanding that that's probably not going to happen and that it's going to go into the next year and maybe even the next and the next, and that we're going to keep on working on it, but that our commitment is to bring awareness, culture building, and move it forward in what we're trying to do. That's what you mean by what you said. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. I think we have informally decided to stay the course. And it sounds like the next step is to have some conversations with our friends in the legislature ASAP. We already have a potential vehicle that was mentioned earlier. And I know we mentioned at least Senate Judiciary and rules. So we can work on those conversations. If anybody feels particularly strongly about wanting to assist with that and be in contact with those committees on the group's behalf, please put that in the chat to let us know that you want to be part of those conversations with the committees. If not, then I assume that Todd and I will do that by default. We are over time. I say that non-derogatorily because I think that it was worth us hashing that through. So we have about 20 minutes left in our allotted time, and we have more than 20 minutes worth of planned stuff. We have the ORE staff on deck to give us a review of legislation that's currently at play. And we also have a brief discussion about RDAP, about our role in the legislative process in general as panel members, and then some public comment. We may have to shift those things around a little bit. With your permission, I'd like to invite public comment first. And then that way, if we run over on our other stuff, then we will have at least gotten in public comment. And we can send you our materials on legislative briefing and stuff if we run out of time for that. Does that sound okay with everyone? Okay. Anybody who's not a member of the panel who'd like to address the panel, please feel free to do so. I'm going to thank you in advance for helping us try and stick to our timing for the rest of this meeting. If you would like to speak, then please feel free to unmute. And if you would prefer to use the chat, we'll be watching the chat as well.
Thank you, Susanna, and good evening, RDAP. It's Reverend Mark Hughes, Executive Director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. And
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but your volume's a little bit low for me.
Yep, let me just see if I can bump that up.
Thanks.
How's that?
Much better, thanks.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. There are a couple of things. I often wonder how relevant it is to this board, but this panel, I should say. But the more I think about it, I think it is that the Equal Protection Constitutional Amendment is, I think it's up for vote maybe tomorrow. I think it's the 7th day on the calendar tomorrow, and I don't know if they literally take it up for the third reading on the 7th day, or that it sits on the calendar for the 7th day and then they do it the following day. But I'm thinking that they may take it up tomorrow. I don't know if anybody on the panel knows that, but what we're operating off of is it looks like they're probably going to take it up for a full Senate vote. It did vote out of Senate Judiciary 500 right before the break. So just want to make you aware of that. Pretty important from just that, from the perspective of the independence from the federal collapse, providing Vermont with the state constitutional foundation for equal protection that operates independently from the failing federal doctrine. And I think that is certainly a possibility. Of course, anything concerning the constitutional amendment we know is going to be settled in courts, in the court, Judge Tebow. So I know you guys are probably watching that. Be curious to hear more from yourself and others, Judge Zone and others, on what their thoughts are on that. Just kind of curious, because with the equal protection basic analysis on the federal level, I'm wondering if there's a possibility for a parallel track for us to do things the Vermont way. There's also possibilities that it could address systemic harm and also just empower us with a last line of defense, because during the periods of civil rights enforcement collapses, we know that the state courts become the last line of constitutional defense in equal protection. So it's just I just think it's just a big deal. So I just wanted to just put that out there. This being the RDAP, it just feels strange talking about it because this is the Racial Disparities in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice System Advisory Panel, but I'm talking about civil rights. But there's something in there that makes me feel like this is totally relevant to what's going on here. The other thing is I want to make you aware of the fact that with the total collapse of the federal civil rights infrastructure, it has affected civil rights prevention, intake, routing, investigation, and resolution. So we know that Vermont civil rights, what we have to do to offset that is that there needs to be some way that we address Vermont civil rights infrastructure in the wake of these federal collapses. S301 is the only policy that came forward. We put that forward, S301. to modernize, unify, and expand Vermont civil rights protections and to ensure equal enjoyment of liberty and dignity and opportunity for all individuals, to integrate and strengthen all civil rights protections, to establish a comprehensive state-funded, state-controlled civil rights enforcement system that's fully independent of the federal funding and policy shifts, and also to replace lost federal civil rights enforcement capacity and to mitigate federal rollbacks by establishing Vermont-specific standards, remedies, and institutions. So for some odd reason, that thing's been stuck on the wall in judiciary, and we're not really getting a whole lot of help getting it off. And if we allow the Vermont Civil Rights Sovereignty and Equal Protection Act of 2026, is which we've designated it, if we allow that to stay on the wall, I believe that, it's my estimation that all protected categories of Vermont are going to be left unnecessarily vulnerable for at least another year. So I don't know what can be done through your efforts, RDAP. If there's any recommendations that you can collectively make, if there are any inquiries that you can individually make, if you have the latitude to do that through your respective agencies. But if we don't offset what the federal government has retrenched on, that leaves a gap, and nobody's talking about that. Nobody's doing anything about that. Just in respect of the rest of your time, I'm going to truncate the rest of my public comment and just leave you with those two things. And what I'll do is I'll follow up with an email to the panel on the other items that I wanted to cover. It was a couple of other ones, but I see you're running up against time. I do appreciate the time for public comment tonight. Please, to the extent that you're able, support the constitutional amendment on equal protection and push to the extent that you are able, S301. Thank you. Check.
Thanks very much. Panel members, you're not required to, but if anybody does have anything that they'd like to say in response to the comment we just received, you can feel free to do so before we move to our last agenda item. For those interested in the bills that Mark mentioned, Todd has helpfully put those into the chat as well. All right. So I am going to ask Laura and Jeffrey from Office of Racial Equity to provide us with the rundown of what's going on in the State House that we should know about. We had tried to be very intentional about inviting more open discussion from you all about what you're seeing in the legislature and feedback on any of the bills that we're presenting. Every month we try to refine this process a little bit more. But I did not leave them very much time. So I'm going to let them adapt and pivot as needed. And thank you all in advance for being patient with us because we have a lot of info to give you. Laura has put some of it in writing in the chat. I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Laura and Jeffrey.
Thank you, Susanna. Todd, I know I ask you this every time, but do I have sharing capabilities?
I think I did that when I remembered to do it right as Susanna did. Okay. So try it out, but I think you're a co-host.
Okay, cool. It looks like I'm good to go. Just to preface before I share my screen, because we are a little low on time, we're going to just highlight one bill each that we think that the panel could maybe have the most impact on. As we have mentioned multiple times throughout this meeting, it's already crossover week. Things are happening, things are moving. And then Jeffrey and I want to highlight the bills that we already know have made crossover that we have talked about before in this panel that you guys will likely see again. But we'll send you the packet like last time so that you can review all of our notes, but just for the sake of time. So let me jump to the, okay. So this is our March quick legislative update. These are all the criminal legal bills that we're kind of watching right now. I'm only going to cover S193. I think that would be the most important one to highlight out of this group. But when you get this later, you can take a look. We've obviously there's some equity concerns in all of these bills, but the ones that we've checked are the ones that we have the most kind of identified concerns with. But like I said, I want to highlight primarily S193, which is an act relating to establishing a forensic facility for certain criminal justice involved persons. This is in their fourth version. I think it's version 4.1. I know that they're going to be voting on this either Wednesday or Thursday. This creates a forensic facility that's under DOC custody. Essentially, they're not going to be building a new building, but they'll be likely delegating a wing of one of the correctional facilities. For these individuals, you are only eligible for placement here if you are not competent to stand trial and you're not eligible for hospitalization. It requires that your competency is restored in order to be released. In the most recent bill version, they did kind of expand on what that looks like. However, prior to that, there was no exit from this facility. As I mentioned before, there's going to be a potential vote on this on 3/11, so that's Wednesday. They've heard testimony from AHS, DMH, DOC, the Office of the Defender General, the Judiciary, the state's attorneys, and Vermont Legal Aid. What I find very interesting is that there was a committee or a working group, Act 23, I believe, of 2023, that was created regarding forensic facilities and forensic care in Vermont, and the lack of a competency restoration program that was led by Stuart Scher, who is the general counsel of DALE, the Department for Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living, and they have not heard any testimony from these individuals. Currently, the bill is also being heard in Senate Health and Welfare by Legislative Council, and I believe they'll have DMH testimony coming up tomorrow. They wanted to hear the bill as well. There's some components of that. So now I'm going to pass it to Jeffrey. Just let me know which slide you need.
Thank you very much. Yes, these are all the bills that I am currently following that has equity concerns. Right now, I will only cover the act relating genetic data privacy, since that is the only bill among the ones I'm following that made it through. This bill was triggered by 23 and me, bankruptcy and data breach affecting 6.9 million users. And from that, this will prohibit sharing genetic data with insurer and employers. And also, it will create a more robust reporting when it comes to how long the data is being stored and who's also accessing that. And this mainly affects a lot of people who are people of color, lower income, who may have data that does not need to be used against them. And then the other that I am going to talk about is the Act S298, creating voting right. This is still under testimony and still being discussed, and this is establishing the voting right protection, criminalize voters, intimidation, creating voters, a safe haven to create education and outreach fund. And can go to the next slide.
Cool. So these are the bills that we know have made crossover so far that we've brought up in this committee. There may be others, but these are the ones I know that we've definitely talked about. So the first one is S208, an act relating to standards for law enforcement identification, S209, an act relating to prohibiting civil arrest in sensitive locations, H635, an act relating to eliminating Department of Corrections supervisory fees, and then the one that Jeffrey walked us through, H639, an act relating to genetic data privacy. Yeah, I think we still have like 5 minutes. If you guys have any questions, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add. These are the bills that we covered in February. That's it.
Thank you both. I don't know if it's the same bill, but I think S298, which we just mentioned, the voting rights bill, I think that one was just recently amended in a way that also gives all of the state's constitutional officers a VSP security detail, like the governor.
Yes.
Okay.
And there were a number of other changes that reduced the pre-clearance idea is no longer in it. It's changed quite a bit from the original as introduced.
Yeah. Derek, see you with a hand.
Yeah, I just got an email from a recent professional connection with Dr. Brashani Reese. I mention her name because I think Rebecca, if I'm not mistaken, you might know Dr. Reese, but she's connected to S140, which is second look legislation. And I know that that's been a specific priority in past reports and attempts of RDAP. And so she mentioned to me that Senator Hashim's granted that effort an hour-long hearing on this Friday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So A, I just wanted to share that, and B, see if there was any more information about that Laura, the office has, because that's exciting and encouraging from my perspective, certainly.
Yeah, actually, I was really excited to see this one come up because the division has some research and policy reports that are going to be coming up this year, and one of them will be on second look sentencing and tying that into legislation that we've seen come up. And I know in the 2025 session year, there was H379, which was introduced, I think, around the same time near the end of kind of the year. So I do believe that the Judiciary and the Defender General's Office gave testimony on 379. I haven't had an opportunity yet to see how 379 and S140 differ, but it is something that we're really excited about, and it is on our agenda. And actually, Rebecca, just spoiler alert, I had planned to send you an email because I know that I believe you were on the second look sentencing committee when the RDAP took it up, and just wanted to ask you some questions, but that can be for future. So that's what I have. I don't know if anybody else has any information on S140, but it was something that we flagged.
Anything else that Jeffrey and Laura did not cover that you all think the group has to be aware of in this very exciting week in the State House?
I would just flag, I think S227, which is Immigration Protocol Protections in Schools, is probably going to move out of the Senate, or at least out of Senate Ed. I know that's on your list, and you guys didn't touch on it, so would just commend that to people's attention. And then S208 and S209, which are the mask requirement for law enforcement and the expansion of sensitive locations in terms of protecting folks from civil enforcement actions. Both of those, I think, are also likely to move to the governor within the next week or two.
Yeah, I remember prior to them being voted out of Senate Judiciary that, or Chair Lalonde had wanted to take up testimony, but it sounds like by next week, they'll probably be moving on that as well, I imagine.
I think that's the plan.
All right. So we are pretty much at time. I'd like to just review some action items really quickly before we break. So here they are. The 7 people who indicated interest in planning a retreat have all confirmed that they are still interested. So we're going to be setting up a meeting. Please look out for that. We, so far, Todd, Lisa, and I, and anyone else who would like, are going to poke some relevant committees about legislation regarding the impact assessments and making sure that there is this, as much as we can, that there is discussion about it in committees before the session is over. See if there's an opportunity to get that in. What else did we say we would do?
One thing we didn't land on that Sheila had flagged was the kind of fleshing out what the chair's duties are. So we got the bullet points that Rebecca and I put in the chat. I'm also happy to just create a document and share it, though that didn't seem to be a great choice with the report. And just collect further ideas and help flesh it out. I don't know. I don't think that needs a subcommittee or meeting. I'm happy to just kind of gather those, and maybe I'll send out an email probably tomorrow to the panel and just say, hey, please share your thoughts. Here's what we've got from the conversation during today's meeting.
Thank you for that, Todd. Have we captured all of them? Is there anything else that we're missing that we said we would do? All right. Then is there anything that has not been said that must be said before we close? Okay, I see how it is. So in that case, let's all go have an evening. I will take a motion to, do we do that? I don't even remember. Do we do that in this group? No, vibes? All right.
There has been mixed practice around there.
Okay. Well, I'm in favor of more accessible and less formal stuff. So I'm just going to leave and you guys can do the same.